some people that couldn't be here tonight sent questions in advance, and, we'll try and answer any questions you have and, explain how we got here, why we got here, what we can do to go forward. We may not all like everything that's going on, but let's, try and make the best of it as we move forward. So I have Councilman Dave Potter here. He and I sit on the Planning and Zoning Board, Council President Phil Zambrana. One of the questions we got a lot was how things will affect the schools. So I thank Superintendent Stephanie Brown for being here, and the Board of Ed President Carl Schneider. We also have Councilwoman Margaret O'Donnell, Councilman John Collins, and then we have our affordable housing specialist attorney Donna Jennings, and our borough planner Mr. Barry couldn't be here this evening, so Susan Gruhl is here from Hiram Gruhl, who do our borough planning. So to start things off, I think it would be helpful if we have a little history of affordable housing. I think that's one of the things that's really confusing. It's confusing a little bit even to us, and we are, deal with it even more. One of the things that I heard after the meeting is like, they're going to bus people here. It's Section 8. It's this and that, and there's a little confusion about what affordable housing versus Section 8 versus other things, and what our component is as far as doing these new developments. And so I will just ask Donna to give a little history of what's happened in the state of New Jersey and how it impacts any building that comes here in Milltown.
Sure. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and for those of you that might be listening on TV. Affordable housing basically started with a landmark decision called the Mount Laurel 1 decision in 1983, and basically it was a bunch of plaintiffs who were trying to live in a certain town that was basically blocking them from living there. And the decision basically says that everybody has a right to affordable housing and a right to live in whatever municipality that you want to live in, and that each municipality has to provide their fair share of low and moderate income housing. Now, just a side note, affordable housing is not subsidized housing. It is not Section 8 housing. It is not a government voucher. These are individuals who make a certain income level, and that they're going to pay their rent or they're going to buy their home based on their income level. And Susan will get into specifics about the income levels. So the first thing I wanted to spell is this is not government-funded housing. This is all basically built by private developers, and there could be nonprofit entities that come in and do 100% affordable. And when the Mount Laurel decision was rendered, there was lots of litigation, other cases that came out, and eventually there was a council on affordable housing created to manage affordable housing, figure out whether or not the municipalities were participating properly, and whether they were providing their fair share of affordable housing. And there's a whole bunch of statutes that regulate exactly how you determine what your municipality is required to develop. Because think about it, we have about 536 municipalities in the state of New Jersey. They come from all different income levels. They're all different sizes with respect to physical size. So Milltown is one of the smaller municipalities. It's only about 1 square mile. You have about 2,700 housing units here, compared to some other towns which are highly condensed in up North Jersey, or some of the towns that are a little bit south of here, like South Brunswick, Monroe, huge, 43 square miles, acres and acres of open land. And so every municipality also has different income levels. You go more towards North Jersey, you're going to have much higher income levels, but much higher housing. So someone's going to have to make a lot more money, even as an affordable housing unit, to actually live in some of the higher end communities, I would say, of North Jersey. And so things were kind of going along smoothly, and they came up with the COA on affordable housing, and they had regulations, and there was what was called the first round and the second round, and everybody was kind of participating. And towns who don't participate basically subjected themselves to what's called a builder's remedy. So you have a town who's like, you know what, I'm not in the business of building houses, and until somebody knocks on our door, we're not really going to worry about it. And if a property owner has land and they're willing to build and they have land that's available, suitable, developable, and approvable, they can do affordable housing and get an increase in density. That's usually how it works. You usually have to build 5 market rate units for every affordable unit in order for the person to actually afford to set aside one of the units for affordable housing. So somewhere around 1999, the wheels kind of fell off the whole procedure. And the Council on Affordable Housing was what we would call defunct. They tried to create some new regulations, and every time they came up with these regulations, they were challenged by either the Fair Share Housing Center people, who are a nonprofit organization. They were challenged by the development community, the New Jersey Builders Association, those types of entities, and they kept successfully tossing them out over and over again. So we have a 16-year period from 1999 to 2015 where it was kind of like the wild, wild west. And some towns just focused and submitted plans and got things blessed and tried to do what they were supposed to do. Milltown did try to participate, but they were told that they didn't come up with enough numbers, and they were kind of asked to provide additional information, and they just kind of never got there because, like, you know, you're 1 square mile town, you're basically developed. There's not a lot of empty land in Milltown to provide affordable housing. And so you do get what's called a vacant land adjustment if you don't have the ability to actually construct your fair share. So around 2015, the Supreme Court of New Jersey said, okay, enough with all this litigation and you guys coming back here. We're sending everything back to the courts. So there's 21 counties. Every county has a special affordable housing judge that's assigned, and every municipality had the opportunity to file what's called a declaratory judgment action by, I want to say it was July 7th, 2015. So the decision came down on March 15th or March 10th, 2015, gave every municipality a window, file your complaint, declaratory judgment action with your county, and then you'll be afforded what's called a temporary immunity, meaning nobody can just come in and sue you right now while we figure out what is your actual number and how are you going to satisfy that number. So if you make a good faith effort to comply, you can do that. Now, of the 500 and some municipalities, only 300 and some of them were actually eligible to file this declaratory judgment action because the other 200 had never bothered to participate. Remember, they said, we're not going to worry about it until somebody comes knocking on our door. They were barred from participating in these DJ actions. Now, while all this was happening, you're all probably very familiar with the Ford Avenue site owned by Mr. Larry Berger. In 2005, or a little bit earlier than that, the town had tried to make efforts to redevelop the site. And they had put out bids and said, we'd like to see who would like to redevelop this particular piece of property. And Mr. Berger didn't throw his name in the hat. He allowed the town to review, I think it was 4 people that had put in their things, and we selected, or the borough selected the Borais to become the redeveloper. And Borais presented a plan, or filed a plan, I should say, with the planning board in full conformance with then was the redevelopment plan for the town. And on the eve of the planning board meeting, Berger filed the lawsuit.
And what year was that?
That was in, he filed in 2000, it got a docket of 2006. So the case has been going on since 2006. I've been involved in the case since 2006. And he had what was a 6-count complaint. And when I read the complaint, I said, okay, I can get rid of 5 of the counts. They were just, I won't get into the details, through what's called a motion for summary judgment. I said, well, I think we have a problem with count number 1. Count number 1 was his builder's remedy claim. He said Milltown never did what they were supposed to do to protect themselves from a builder's remedy lawsuit. They had started the process. Remember, in 2004, they got kicked out. Now it's only 2006. It's not like you were waiting forever. You had tried to participate. So I said, but he has to prove it. He has to, we're not just going to collapse and say, you're right, we don't comply. I said, we'll have a trial about it and let the judge decide, because now you have what's very interesting about the Milltown case, from a legal standpoint, of course, is that you have a third party involved, the redeveloper, who has already expended significant money to have drafted up plans and participated in the process up to this point, and he still wanted to keep his eggs in the basket. He was not looking to walk away. He was committed to building this particular piece of property, and we argued that he had a right to do it. So first case, believe it or not, didn't actually go to trial until 2011. There's lots of motions, lots of other pieces of litigation Mr. Berger filed. In the course of the 17 years, he has filed no less than 8 pieces of litigation. One in federal court, all the rest of them were in state court. I think I'm on the 8th judge in the case, so it's really been quite a convoluted particular case. But at the end of the day, in 2011, he argued that he could build 550 units at the site, and he would set aside 20% for 120 units. We had a project, initially I think we were like 325, but the special master said 350. And I told them I think that the judge is just going to do what the special master said, and it's going to be 350. And so they came up with the 350 was the appropriate number of units we built on the Ford Avenue site. And part of the judge's reasoning is at the time, the town had an obligation, 64 units for what's called the second round. The second round obligation is you got to build 64 units. So there's 70 that are set aside on the Ford Avenue site. So we had a couple of extra for third round because in 2011, nobody knew. Again, there was all that litigation going on, and the rules kept changing, and none of the witnesses would testify as to what they thought Milltown's third round obligation was. So after this 2015 decision came, unfortunately, Berger made a motion and said, well, you know, the trial was about the second round obligation. Milltown still hasn't done anything for third round. I want to do 550 units on the site. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. We had a whole trial about this. It was a week-long trial. But he made an argument, the judge bought it, and the judge said, okay, I believe, because now it's a new judge, the judges kept switching, he said, I believe Judge Hurley just blessed it because it satisfied your second round, but now we have a pretty good idea of what your third round obligation is, because they went back to calculating it the old way, and so you guys have to come up with some more units. Now my position was, we can't fit 10 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket. Let's stick to our guns and let Berger prove that he can do 550. Let's stick with our 350. That was our game plan, and we won. We won the second trial, ended in 2018, and there was a decision written by Judge Natale that summer, and he agreed that Berger's was just squishing too much into that piece of property, and it just, there's, one of the arguments with the Mount Laurel housing is, look, you could just take a building and build it 100 stories high and put all the affordable in it. That's not, it's supposed to be planning. And what does Milltown look like? It's a small town. You've got 2.5-story, mostly structures. You've got a 4-story building here or there, but not much. So we don't want to overwhelm the middle of Milltown with 10-story buildings. That just isn't fair. And the county had, at the time, had agreed to do a 50-foot, I want to say, walkway along Mill Pond, so that it could connect the linkage to Lawrence Brook through East Brunswick and connect as a whole county master plan. And I said, open space is also something important, another state goal, and so you can't do one and to the exclusion of the other. And the judge, bought all into that. And so, Borai was still, and the interesting thing about, I should have said about the 2011 decision, was the judge ruled that Milltown was not in compliance with its affordable housing, but Berger was not entitled to the builder's remedy lawsuit because he did not come to court with clean hands, but that Borai, so the site actually has the builder's remedy lawsuit, which is very unique. I think it's the only case in the state that's where the judge ruled, and it's never gone any further. We're in the law division still because there's not a final judgment of compliance, which is just another legal thing. So in 2018, Natale goes up the appellate division. Judge McCluskey now has our case. Why it hasn't gone anywhere is, again, Berger keeps filing lawsuits. And in the interim, there was another vicinage, Mercer County, Judge Jacobson, and there was a 40-day trial, I think. They decided, how do you calculate everybody's fair share? And Milltown's number now for what's the third round is 128 units. So the Ford Avenue site only covers 64 units from the second round. We now have an obligation. Third round goes from that 1999, well, there's a gap here, to 2015, and then 2015 to 2025. Now it's 2023. So third round's coming to an end. And you guys have a 128 unit obligation for third round. And when you look around the town, there's no place to actually, do you have a question?
I have 3 questions.
Can you wait, let her
I
finish?
can. Just while you're speaking, would you refresh what is builder's remedy? You mentioned at the beginning, but I don't remember what it is.
So a builder's remedy is if somebody has land, whether it's an individual or an entity, and you realize that the town does not meet its affordable housing obligation, you could sue the town for a builder's remedy, and you just have to demonstrate that the town's not in compliance and that your land's available, suitable, developable, and approvable. So you can't have a wetlands where the DEP is going to not let you build it. You have to be able to have public water and sewer, or at least a way to get water and sewer to your site, whether it's by private well and a septic system, and that it's suitable. I mean, it just can't. You're not going to put housing out on the turnpike,
So it's the property owner suing the town.
or a developer who's under contract to purchase. Like a lot of my clients, because I mostly represent developer clients, and I readily sue towns all over the state under builder's remedy. Or I intervene into the DJ actions, because those towns, remember there were towns that filed that were okay. They had tried to do everything that was right. The rules kept changing on them, so they were protected if they filed this declaratory judgment. But those cases, believe it or not, they started in 2015 and were supposed to wrap up by the end of 2015. Some of them are still going, and some towns still didn't participate. So I've been finding the towns that didn't do anything even up to today, and I've been suing them for builder's remedies, because it's like, hello, wake up, people.
So I'll save my 3rd question, but my second is, who is your client?
You guys are my client.
The town of Millville.
So I've been fighting,
Borough.
defending you against Berger for the 17 years.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Right, so trying to get you guys into compliance with the rules constantly changing. So it's not been an easy task. And Mr. Berger, he's done a great job keeping this. I don't know if it's just a fun game for him, what the end goal is, because, besides the affordable housing thing, there's, the town did try to move to condemn the property and move that. He's challenging the condemnation award. He has bankruptcy going. We just had another trial in March. He was challenging the housing element fair share plan and how we just did an amendment to it. It's very technical. Judge McCluskey wrote a great 30-page decision. So I think Berger's going to have a hard time appealing that one, but we should be close to getting our compliance. But
Didn't we change the amount of units? Isn't it less than 330 now?
well, okay, I'm going to get to that. Yeah.
All right.
So one of the things we've been trying to get is finished, and on the Ford Avenue site, we actually were able to get the county to amend what was called our original agreement and to actually purchase more of the property, kick in more of the county funds. I believe that they're going to, at the end of the day, 40% of the Ford Avenue site will become open space. And instead of having the 350 units, I believe we're down to 300 or something like that. We dropped the number of market rate units.
That's about right. That's about
With,
right. Yeah.
but with keeping the 70, it's critical that we build the 70 affordable units at the Ford Avenue site so that we're done with 2nd round and we have a couple units for 3rd round. We all thought it was a great idea. That was what the trial was just about. He kind of challenged all of that process, and McCluskey said, you're wrong. They can do this. It doesn't change anything. The ultimate goal was to get the 70 unit yield of the affordable, and again, we're now going to have more open space for Milltown. So you're going to have a nice big area of open space on the Ford Avenue site eventually. So while all that's happening, there's many other things that you need to do to get into compliance with your affordable housing obligation. And as a town that has no real developable land, a part of the process was you had to drive around with your planner and the special master and try to identify any lots that you might be able to consolidate to create a big enough parcel that you could build multifamily housing on. And so through that process and/or overlay zones, was there any big pieces of parcels that in the future, if somebody wanted to build affordable housing, could they do it? And the special master really directed a lot of it. She would pick lots and we would say, well, that lot's no good, that's wet, or the railroad track's going through there, or that J&J owns that, they're never going to give it up. So there was a lot of back and forth, but there was eventually, I believe, 7 sites that have overlay zones on them, mostly like the downtown area. And then, of course, by the Acme the Target, the Home Depot. There's a gigantic piece of property, right, which in the future, you know, we didn't know when, we had to create a realistic opportunity to build affordable housing. And what ended up happening is, we did the overlay, and then
That was
the
in
2019, yep. And then in 2020, somewhere that around there, the Acme told the property owner, we're vacating. And he was like, what? He was reaching out to the town, and he realized that his property was actually put into this overlay zone. So then he hired an attorney, intervened in our builder's remedy lawsuit. They wanted to build more units than we had already put in the plan. They wanted to get a pilot, and we said no. We said, we already thought about this, it's 15 units to an acre, it's already generous enough, you're not getting a pilot from us. They then came back and said, okay, well, what about if we build more of the units up front and keep the density at 15 units to an acre? So the project that just went before the planning board was the project that took some of the units, I guess there's a strip mall near the Target he owns, that piece. He's not going to build those right now. He put some of them over to the site that was just subject to the planning board hearings. Now, when he filed the original application, the Higher Rules Office reviewed it, and John Barry called me up and he said, I think there's a problem. They're looking to get a height variance now. And I said, no way. We vetted this whole thing. They showed us plans. They told us what both variances that they needed. We adopted an ordinance. This has to be exactly conforming. We already did this. And we're not going to the zoning board. We're not supporting, we don't have to. I said, well, I think we could actually reject it if it goes to the zoning board, because this is something that they had negotiated, and too bad. They might have to lose some units. I said, all we allowed them to do was, if they could build more in the first phase, but if they can't build them, too bad, too sad, they can wait until they get to the second phase, if they ever get to the second phase. And so they went back to the drawing board, and they did submit an application that was fully conforming with the redevelopment plan, and that was the application that just recently went before the planning board and ultimately had to be approved. Because when the law basically says if you submit a plan that's fully conforming with the township redevelopment plan or ordinance, the planning board shall grant an approval. And so the planning board, I thought, did a very good job, though, of vetting the plans and asking for a lot of changes and things like that, to which the developer readily agreed, and so now he has a project. And so from that project, I forget how many units are on there,
I think it's
190, so 20% of those are set aside for affordable housing, so we pick up like 38, so you get 38 more units, but think about it, your third round obligation is 128. So we got minus 38, gets us to 90, minus the 6 extra that we're in, and then there's some credits for having rentals. So you're still short a good 75 units for the third round. So it's possible that some of these other small assemblages could knock on the door and build some units, but you got to remember, you really need to build 5 market rate to really be able to afford the one affordable. So you're not going to, there's not too many other areas where there's.
No, it was where Rita's is, and now that's going to be the self-storage place. That was another overlay zone.
But it's self-storage, right? The developer, it's an overlay, so the property owner has the right to either do the zoning, build under the zoning that's the current zoning, or take advantage of the overlay if they want to. Now, the one thing is, the town just has a zone for it. The town is not responsible for building any affordable units, not responsible, you can't force somebody who owns property to build actual units. Somebody has to come and do it. But now, you've been protected from anybody, suing you for more of another builder's remedy. But we are fast approaching fourth round. So the fourth round is going to be 2025 to 2035, and there's going to be another number that's going to be assigned to Milltown. But you're not going to be able to meet it, and you're going to be protected by what's called the vacant land adjustment. There's just no way, no one's going to, East Brunswick's not going to give you any of their land, New Brunswick's not going to give you any of their land, so you're just going to say, this is what we got, and if there's an opportunity in the future, maybe Home Depot and Target go out. I doubt it. Those things thrive during COVID. I think that's a great spot. They're probably going to be there forever. That site itself is very complicated because, and I think part of the reason why the property owner of Acme didn't do the other phase is there's all sorts of easements drainage easements, access easements, all intertwined, and those properties are all together. So it'd be very hard to, I think, unwind all those easements, but who knows? They might become creative and come up with something. So that's kind of the state where we're at. I mean, hopefully with the Berger litigation, every year, I hate to say it, my office always laughs at me. They're like, "You're not going to a meeting in Milltown again, are you?" I'm like, "Yes, I am." They were laughing at me at lunch today. They're like, "Oh my goodness." I'm like, it is just what it is. I'm hopeful that we'll get at least final compliance, but then we're gonna have to gear up for the fourth round and figure out what to do. So,
That was a good.
Donna, that's my question. If we're in 2023, when are we going to find out what that number is?
well, first we have to find out whether or not the courts are gonna keep it in the courts, if they're going to, maybe the governor is gonna reignite the Council on Affordable Housing, or come up with some other kind of mechanism. Personally, I like the courts. I think, you guys don't wanna hear it, but the courts, affordable housing is important. There's a lot of people who need affordable housing, and when Susan gives you the numbers, you're gonna be surprised about who actually qualifies for affordable housing. And I think there's a greater need now, and with the courts, if you drive around, you'll see multifamily developments going up, and almost every one of those multifamily developments, there's a huge one right on Ticey's in East Brunswick. I got that project approved. That's 500 and some units. 20% set aside for affordable housing. So that's, and I think East Brunswick has quite a few bigger developments right along through the Route 18 corridor, and they're doing what they can do. But there are other municipalities like, Monroe and South Brunswick. You know what their obligations are? More than 1,000, but 1,000's the cap for 10 years. So they have 1,000 units they were supposed to build. To build 1,000 units means you got to build 6,000. So, there's a big demand for affordable housing, and in the one respect, you guys are lucky. You don't really have the land to build anymore, so you have a finite pot. You've got so many housing units that you have, and there's only so much that you can shove into it. But the other towns that have a lot of open space, they're the ones that are going to bear the brunt of affordable housing because they've got the land. And we've got to put the housing somewhere. And the towns like in the more North Jersey area, they're older, so their downtowns are getting revamped, and they're not happy about it. I have quite a few projects in North Jersey, and they fight. But it's just like, you guys, you have to have affordable housing here. I know that you have your $3 million home, but somebody else wants to live in your town. They want to enjoy your downtown area. They want to have access to the train station to get to New York or whatever it is. You have to let people in, and that's really what Mount Laurel was about, giving everybody an opportunity to live wherever you wanted to live in the state and be able to afford to live there.
Thank you.
Does it have to be new construction?
So there's our different components. The number that I quoted is your new construction component. There is a rehab component. So that there's a certain idea I only remember the second round, it was like 10 units. You don't have a lot. But that is something important. If there's somebody in the town and you feel that you qualify for the rehab, I don't know what kind of money is in the town's affordable housing thing. Because you have to remember too, when another component of affordable housing is the non-residential, right? So when you build a self-storage facility, they should have given, under the state law, 2% set aside of the equalized assessed value of the self-storage facility. That money goes into the township's affordable housing trust fund, and they can use that to do rehab on certain projects. But I don't know Susan would know more about the rehab and how all that works.
We'll go to Susan
Can I
next,
say-
but can we?
Just one- just
Yeah,
real-
no,
just a
well,
point
I
of-
was gonna say, any other questions for Don?
Yeah, well, because it's very interesting, right? But just as far as they and you, if you can use specific terms as far as Acme they applied for, just as a point, just moving forward as we continue. the
Oh, so
discussion.
actually, right, so.
They, who's they? They is the property owner that,
Correct.
okay,
It could be the property owner, contract purchaser, but in the Acme thing, he is the owner. And I
okay.
just refer to it as the Acme site, so it's not Acme.
Yeah, now
It's
is there
the
a
property
benefit,
owner.
is there a benefit for Acme in particular? I mean, that property,
No, Acme doesn't own the property. Acme was a tenant. and
the
they
tenant,
wanted
yeah,
to-
no, but on the Acme property itself,
Arisa owns the property.
okay, yeah, but is there, so as far as building higher there on the outskirts of town in order to meet the affordable housing obligations, does that free up room on Ford Ave? I'm concerned that we're gonna have,
No,
I'm
so,
concerned that we're gonna have a lot of development of housing in the center of town, which is really valuable space, not utilized properly right now, of course.
Right. So if you were listening, what I said was the Ford Avenue handles your second round obligation, which was 64 units.
Okay,
The Arisa, or the Acme site, where the Acme is, but it's not Acme's property, it's the Arisa property.
yeah.
That's part of your third round obligation, which you still are short about 75 units.
But the plans for Ford Avenue were set, and our planner can talk about the zoning. We do have a height ordinance in Milltown, so she'll go into a little more detail about that as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see personally, I have a few different issues, and I don't think it's really there right now, but one with school, my daughter's just graduated kindergarten right over there. There's no more room in the schools.
Well,
So
that's that's
general.
why we have the school board
Oh,
people
great,
here to
great,
answer
great.
the question about that.
And then just having, I think it's really unique that Milltown has this large parcel of land in the center of town. Certainly Brownfield certainly has environmental contamination. It's really unique, and I just think it's an opportunity for all of us as Miltonians to really, make it something special. And maybe the plans that I saw seem to be kind of standard, two-story townhouse style residential development. I didn't see the open space in the plans that I reviewed, but maybe I missed it.
That was done a few years ago.
Yeah.
And again, one of the things for any of these properties is Milltown doesn't own it. That there are developers or people that are
Right.
going to develop it.
Oh, yeah,
Right,
this-
so
yeah.
for Acme, one of the things that I was joking about before is after the planning board, there was a headline in the newspaper, Milltown to demolish Acme. Milltown isn't going to demolish. The borough of Milltown does not own that property to do that. We
Oh, yeah.
have the conduits for zoning and planning and things to control the development, but we don't own that property. We are not the developers of that property, and we are not kicking Acme out, or we're not going at with a jackhammer to tear it down.
Certainly no, I didn't mean to.
Right, no.
It sounded
it's-
like
it's-
I was saying
no,
that.
it's within the parameters of what we can do and can't do, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have this meeting, is to sort of explain how that works and how we've gotten to the situation that we are in now.
Yeah, it makes me nervous, certainly with the school overcrowding.
Right. So, yeah, we'll talk
taxes,
about it more. Thank you. Jessica.
So you're talking about these phases and our obligation in phase 2 or round, whatever. So-
Round 2.
Okay, maybe you're going to do it. Just clarify what that means. Is the state managing these phases and say every 5 years you got to do this, or how does that work? And then how does
Right, so
translate?
that would be, we'll let Susan get into that, because like I told you, there's a way to calculate every municipality's fair share. And so there was a big case in Mercer County, Judge Jacobson, and when they finished their 40-day trial, they had come up with a formula as to how we were going to calculate each municipality's fair share obligation. And there's now a report out there, and Milltown's is 128 units for the third round. What's going to happen for the fourth round, we don't know yet. We don't know if the legislature's going to step in, because they're really the ones that should do it. The courts don't really want to do it. They're like, we should not be legislating all of this. This really should be coming from the legislation, but COA didn't work for 16 years. It's working in the courts. People are doing stuff. The judges are holding the town's feet to the fire. They're making them do plans. And the ones that do it, they get protected. And then they have their immunity for 10, like if you did it right away, you were protected for 10 years. So if you go in 2025, and you know what your number is, and you come up with a plan, and like your plan really wouldn't change very much. There's nothing new that we could really do
But you're protected from what?
from somebody still suing you on a builder's remedy. So a builder's remedy is really the developer or property owner controlling what's going to happen on the site. Where if you plan ahead of time and you have the overlays, the town controls what happens on the site. But you lose your right to control what happens on the site when you don't have a plan and you don't have that immunity. So the builder's remedy and the Berger case is basically he went in and sued, and there was a plan to redevelop that site with, I think it was going to be all senior citizen housing, and that was thrown out the window because the town did not have immunity.
Yeah.
Where can one go to see where the overlay areas are today designated by our town?
You go to your housing element and fair share plan, they're all laid out in this document, and in the zoning.
Is that on the website?
Should be.
I'll have to check, I'm not sure, but I can have it put up there if it is.
It should be somewhere
Yeah.
there, because we just did that 3 years ago, 4
Right.
years ago. Yeah.
December
Everything should be on the
23rd,
website.
2019.
And if not, we'll make sure it gets. Any other questions for Donna? And then we're gonna go to the plan. Yes?
Yeah, I'm curious, you keep mentioning units, the obligations. Is there a formula then that breaks that down to the affordable plus the other units then, whether they're one bedroom, two bedroom, or three?
Right, so whatever your number is, so let's say the 38 units coming out of the Arissa project or the Acme site, you can only have a maximum 20% one bedroom, a minimum 20% three bedroom, and then the remainder could be 2 or 3 bedrooms. So with the Arissa, we told them, you're only getting the 20% 3 bedrooms, we don't want any more 3 bedrooms. We try to, and now all the market rate are 1 and 2, so there are no 3-bedroom market rate, I believe, on that site.
But that's all set by the state?
Nope, that's up by, well, the percentages by the state, by the code, yes, by the statute. So every town has the same requirement. And then there's 13% of the low have to be very low income. And then Susan could explain better.
You want, anybody other for specific for Donna? Yes.
Do you think that Mr. Berger is so resistant because of the financial end, or because he's not getting what he wants for building so many units? What's?
Well, it's always about money, right? So he wanted to do 550 units, and the site was approved for 350. So you do the math, that's 200 less units. The units are worth probably $40,000 a pop, you would guess. So he figures he's losing all that money that he thinks he's entitled to. But that's a whole nother lawsuit, right? There was condemnation, he didn't just no one could ever come to an agreement on what the fair market value of the property is. So there's a whole separate lawsuit regarding the condemnation and the value of the land. I believe the commissioners came up with 13 million. He challenged it as too low, we challenged it as too high. So that's to be litigated.
One question from Donna. Donna, I was wondering if you could please clarify the ownership of the Ford Avenue site, because I know you mentioned Mr. Berger, but I believe it's actually corporate ownership.
There's like 4 different entities at each sites. I don't know all of the names, so I don't want to say the wrong names, but there are his entities. And he's the principal owner
Thank you.
of them all.
Donna, you're gonna go over the levels, like the income levels of low income and moderate income?
That's coming right now.
That's coming up, and is that adjusted for inflation also?
It is, I don't know.
Yes, it
So
is.
that might be a good segue to go to Susan Poole, who is the borough planner. So she has the planner was involved in the, looking over the Arissa property, and also, but she can explain about the affordable housing income level.
I just like to explain affordable housing. And I know that the mayor and Donna said, you know, this isn't Section 8, this isn't public housing. And it's surprising, I'm sure that some of you will be very surprised at what the income limits are for affordable housing and who actually does live in affordable housing. There have been studies that have looked at that. In terms of 2023, and there is, inflation is taken into account each year a little bit. Okay, so this is 2023, May of 2023. And the income limits are based upon housing regions in the state as well as household size. And I'm going to rely on, even though there are categories of each thing, I'm just going to talk about a 4-person household in what is considered to be Region 3.
And there's 6 regions total.
And there are 6 regions. Region 3 includes Hunterdon, Middlesex, and Somerset. And for a 4-person household, the median income, which is 50% below, 50% above, is $142,000, almost $143,000. A moderate income household is considered up to 80% of median. And that is, a moderate income is from 50% to 80% of median. So you can make up to, as a 4-person household, up to $114,000 and still qualify as a moderate income household and live in these units. In terms of low income, which is 30% to 50% of median, okay? And that turns out to be low, up to 71,000, a little more than that, $71,000 for a 4-person household. That's a nice amount, okay? That's not Section 8 by any means. And the last one, which is very low, which is under 30%, is almost $43,000. That's the lowest, very low, $43,000 for a 4-person household. And again, these are categorized by the number of people in the household, so obviously you have more people, you can make more money.
Yeah, like you tell them like if you have less people.
Well, if you have
What's
less,
one person?
if you only have one person,
Single.
the moderate is 80,000. So as a 1-person household, you can make up to $80,000 and still qualify as a moderate income household. If this is 1 person again, if you're low, it's 50,000. And the very low is 30,000 for a 1 person. It's all related to median income of the region. And that's how they qualify the way that it is. So there's a very specific way of defining who qualifies. Now what they found is, now that I've read what these numbers are, that a lot of the people that live in affordable housing are municipal workers, firemen, police, teachers, divorced parents with kids. That's a major category of people that live in affordable housing. So kids out of school, and they don't make that much money, and they may qualify for affordable housing. So that just kind of gives you a sense as to that. Yeah, we're going through, it's very, and just to kind of pick up on what Donna said, it's a very complicated formula to determine every municipality's obligation. And just to add, it has been deemed to be a constitutional obligation. It's not just an obligation out there, it's constitutional. The courts have said the New Jersey State Constitution requires every municipality to address their affordable housing obligation. So, and every community is doing that in some form. But first you have to find the numbers, and that's on its own can make your head explode to try to figure that out.
You can share that on the website too, so that everybody can take it.
Yeah, I've got this. This comes out, and this is what it is. Yeah, okay. And then these different phases, I guess, and then within each time frame, there's present need, which is, and I'll just generally go through. There's a present need which is considered to be rehabilitation, and that addresses, it's a statistical way of looking at it, but basically it's substandard housing within your municipality. Most municipalities have some type of substandard housing, and it's not cosmetic, it's major systems, okay? It may be overcrowded too. That's the one. Then this prior round that Donna was talking about, which is what happened before and your obligation before, and have you addressed it and such, and we were talking about Ford Avenue. And then this third round, which goes until July of 2025, here we're having so much fun trying to deal with the third round, then we can look forward to the next round. First of all, we have no idea what those numbers are. We may have some sense from Judge Jacobson if in fact the courts adopt that methodology, but who knows, okay? And then the question becomes is, all right, you have the numbers, now what are you gonna do with it? And in your instance, as Donna said, there's no room. What do you do in a community, and you know they're all over the state, you're not the only one, but what do you do in a community where you just don't have room to find vacant property to address your affordable housing obligation? So what do? You look at potential redevelopment, and I use that term generically, redevelopment sites where you can put these overlays over the existing zoning. And you either permit the existing zoning, whatever that is, like what we're talking about, Acme, they had existing commercial zoning, and they were doing whatever they were doing, and then there's this layer, a new layer of zoning that permits them to do residential but it's required to have an affordable housing units. They have to have those units. And by the way, those are deed restricted for 30 years. They can't just say they're going to do it and then say, aha, in another year, we're going to change that and we're just going to have market units. No, 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 no. It's a 30-year deed restriction. That's part of their legal obligation.
So a person that owns one of those, when they go to sell it, they have to stay within a certain market value because of that?
Yes, basically. Now, there are some, again, there's some inflation kind of considerations, a little bit, but not much. A lot of times it's rental because a lot of low and very low income people just don't have the credit to be able to purchase a house. And that's why oftentimes there is a incentive built in to have rental housing because you know that at least people have the opportunity to rent. So, and there's also a cap on seniors, because everybody loves seniors. I mean, they don't have crazy parties and party, although some of them might have more parties than others. But the point being is that there is an absolute need for family affordable. And so some of the regulations, and again, I don't want your head to explode, but some of the regulations limit the number of senior housing units that you can do as well.
Can somebody who is renting an affordable unit price themselves out of it? What I mean is this.
Yes.
I'm the head of a family of 4, I make $70,000. I'm low income. I go in, next month, I get a $50,000 raise or a new job. I'm no longer eligible for that. Is that monitored? Is it revisited? Do you get kicked out? How does that work?
Well, I was just going to say, yes, there's an affordable housing liaison, and you have to demonstrate your income limits, and you would have to advise that you're over, and you'd have to vacate.
But on day 1 I am, and I can show you my pay stub on day 1.
Yep.
On day 100, I got a great new job.
Right.
I'm no longer eligible for where I am. Do I have to, is it a voluntary? I'm going to come back and say, look, I got a raise, you got to kick me out?
I don't know exactly how that works, but
Check
yes,
your-
there's got to be something in the rental agreement that would require you to advise if your income limit's no longer, because you're no longer qualified to live there, and they need to have other people. There's a lot of waiting list on many, many of these projects. So think about it. There's only 38 units coming out of the Acme site. There's a lot of people that want those units. So there's somebody that's going to be waiting, and they're going to find out.
Who sets the rent?
That's also regulated by the state.
Yeah, right. It's all regulated, and it's also even in terms of sales. If you are purchasing something, there are asset considerations. You can't just all of a sudden have $1 million in a bank account and say, oh, but I don't have the income, and therefore I should live in that unit. That's part of consideration. There are a lot of constraints. There are a lot of regulations that try at least to make it so people can't play the system as such.
Who decides if the units built are going to be sold or rented?
The developer. They have the right to decide. You can't control ownership of land. I've litigated that.
And you-
So,
You
success.
you just explained this entire thing in which control of ownership of land is actually in place. That's what this is, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they're setting, the rents are being set by the state.
For
And
the
just-
affordable, not
yes.
for the market rate. You charge whatever the market demands, right? But the affordable, absolutely, it's all regulated by the state.
Yes.
Market rates now.
No.
And so with the overlay zones, right after that, in Milltown, COVID hits, right? So all of a sudden, where commercial used to be attractive, you see all these malls that are now sitting empty. I think residential now has become more attractive to the developers because, who would have known that everybody would be able to stay home and shop and not go to stores? So I imagine in a lot of these other bigger towns that have
Oh, they have-
malls or strip malls, that this is going
Banks
to
seem to be
happening all over.
Absolutely.
Closing up, so a lot
They're
of
called
banks are
gray,
revamping.
gray fields, where you have commercial and you have a whole, parking, sea of parking. And those are unbelievable in terms of potential for, again, I use the term redevelopment, not statutory redevelopment, but for reuse. And it is, it's happening all over the state.
So would you briefly explain how the rounds work? Like, so how many rounds are there? When was the first one? When did it end? Are they time rounds? Are they, how's that work? What round are we in right now? And what does that mean to be in round 3? If we didn't meet round 2 obligation, does it accumulate?
Yeah.
It
your
does,
obligation?
and that's
never-
why the prior round, it's called prior round. And that addresses all of what happened before, from when the court cases started up until 1999. And then 1999, well, there was litigation about.
That was when the third round was
when
supposed to
it
start.
was- So now, yeah, the third round is a longer period of time because they had to make up for that time that there was no obligation, COLA was kind of out there doing their thing. but
Well, they call
not
it
doing-
actually the gap
Yeah.
years. So from 1999 to 2015, before the Supreme Court decision, they called it the gap years. So the second round ended in 1999. Nobody seemed to be able to adopt regulations that would withstand a constitutional challenge. And so that's why it went back to court, that March 10th, 2015 decision. That started the third round, 2015, and they said they would be 10-year rounds. It's kind of basically connected to the census. Every 10 years we have a census. Because all of the calculations are all based on population, and it's shifting, right? Some counties are gaining people, some are losing people. So that all impacts how do we calculate what the municipality's obligation is, because it is dependent on how many people are there and what is the income of that particular group of people. It all is related.
So this round actually has those two components. It's the third round, but it picked up on that gap period because it was just,
Yeah, your number's 128, but like 71 of them are from the gap year, and the remaining are from the actual third round.
And if we do nothing by 2025, then we're going to, that number.
Then you just add up.
Yeah.
Right, you're gonna get a new number from 2025 to 2035, just like every other municipality.
And how, is this ad infinitum?
Yeah.
Is this for the rest of our
Supposedly.
creation? I mean, at some point.
Unless everybody all of a sudden can afford their own housing. I think it's just getting worse. Housing market, look at how crazy the market went, the real estate market. People bidding over and over again just for the buying. So really, a lot of people can't buy now. They're all looking for rentals.
So, question for you. In terms of our count, if there is a home in Milltown in which a family of 4 lives and they make $70,000, can they retroactively say, this is affordable housing? You've got a
Well,
family in
that's
there
their
that meets
house.
the criteria.
They'd have to deed restrict it, and
For
it's not
30
really
years.
for 30 years. They're not going to do that.
No.
What's the restriction?
They can't charge. They have to keep it within an income level of an affordable household that could afford it. So unless you give them, as Donna said before, it's all money based. Unless you're going to give them money to deed restrict, which means for 30 years, you're only going to do, it's only that unit is affordable, then unless you get money to do that.
Or compensatory benefits. That, one of the reasons why all the rules kept getting thrown out was the towns, or the COA, was trying to make everybody who was actually doing the building kind of pay for it all. And said, oh, if you're gonna build 10 units, we want 2 of them automatically be affordable. And said, well, wait a minute, I was entitled to build 10 units. Why do I have to set aside 2 units? What am I getting from it? That's what the zoning was. So when you do affordable housing, it's usually you get a compensatory benefit, and the benefit is an increase in density. So instead of only getting to build the 10 units, now maybe I get to build 40 units, and I'm gonna set aside 20% to the affordable, because now I can afford to actually build those 20 extra unit, or that 20% set aside, because I'm gonna have more market rate to make up the difference.
Because affordable housing tends to be a deficit for construction, because you can't get the rent, let's use it as rent. You can't get the rent to make up for whatever the income is, okay? So the concept is you are internally subsidizing. The developer is internally subsidizing those affordable units with their market units. With that increase in the number of market units that they get, internally subsidizes those where you lose money on, the low income.
Right, so I'll give you an example. One of my clients' projects, which is a 30-unit project, 6 of them are affordable, and these were for sale. The market rate ones started at $850 a unit, townhouse unit. The market rate, the highest one that could be sold was $110,000. They were just like basically the market rate ones. So a little bit smaller in size, but all this, you wouldn't know it, like if you drove by it, looked exactly the same on the outside. Many of the same type of interior fixings, because it's actually cheaper to order 30 of the same thing than order 24 of one and 6 of another, because then if something breaks, you're like, well, what model was that? So they actually, most of these units, these inclusionary developments, the affordable are actually getting the same interior as the market rate. Because for the developer, it's actually cheaper to buy in bulk than it is to set aside and give the people not as good of a line and a washer and dryer or whatever it is that they're having. So that's the difference. So in order to build those 6 affordable units, and he could only sell for 100, I think 121 was the highest level. He got to build the extra, the 24 unit market rates at $850. But, I mean, get a brand new townhouse for $100,000? I mean, that's pretty, in a really nice town.
We have a question.
So I have a couple questions. There's nothing mentioned about the Main and Kuthal Avenue property. How does that affect the numbers, the medium and low income numbers that are required?
I'm not exactly sure.
Is that part of the overlay? Is that the overlay?
It's all the same. I mean, it's just, it's another area where affordable housing can be
If it was
built.
part of the, I think it was, or I don't know. But if it was part of the overlay zone, then it would be the same thing, if it was developed.
Is he talking about the rehabilitation on Main Street? Is that-
No, the property.
The Whitman property,
Right.
right? He's the one that owns it?
If it's part of the, if it has a certain amount of units, then, and it's part of the overlay zone, it would go for the same formula.
Right, it's the same, so it's basically the same. So like the Ford Avenue and the Acme and all these overlay zones, if they were to be developed, they basically have to charge the same rents. If they got a 1-bedroom, it's gonna be this amount. If there's a 2-bedroom, it's that amount. 3-bedroom, it's this amount. Because this Milltown, you're in the Region 3, and it's all formulated, and it's all based on the number of people in your house as well. So if you have a 2-bedroom and you have 3 people living in it, then you have a certain income level, or the rent is gonna be so much. So it's all formulaic. We don't decide, oh, I'm gonna charge a little bit more because I'm on Main Street. You can't. It has nothing to do with it. It's just all the same in the town.
But that's only if it's an overlay zone.
Oh, only, well, the overlay is providing it now, You could always file an application and seek a use variance and say,
I'm looking at the map now, and the Woodland property is not an overlay.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, okay.
yeah, I don't know your town like all the
So my question is, why isn't in the overlay as a cluster, proposed cluster of development that it's going to be? Because there's going to be how many
I
units
think
in
there
it?
was probably property on it back when we did that.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another component though.
It was an
which I
empty then,
forgot
I think.
to mention. As part of, when you take a vacant land adjustment in your developed community, many times it's required that you have a mandatory set-aside ordinance, which means if you have development, you zone the municipality at a multifamily at 6 units to the acre or more, you must provide for a 20% set-aside.
And do we have that in the
Yeah,
bill?
yes.
Okay.
That is part of the affordable housing plan, and it's been, so, and that's not unusual at all.
So that helps lower those numbers for, say, Acme or Ford Avenue?
No,
No,
we don't
no,
have
no.
to.
it
formula?
just addresses the
Overall.
obligation.
The overall
Right,
formula?
right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, because you have the 64 units from second round that's taken care of by Ford Avenue. 128 units, 38 are coming off of the Acme site,
Okay.
leaving you a large number still left somewhere that we have to find to build affordable. So as multifamily is being developed, they have to set aside 20%. I mean, how big are these projects going to be? They're not going to be the size of Acme or Ford Avenue.
Correct.
Actually, and I should just clarify, if it's rental, it's 15%.
Not
If
vacant
it's
land, though.
Sale, it's on the mandatory set-aside.
It's 20% in vacant.
That's different than
But it wasn't all vacant. It was buildings that were knocked down.
about that.
No, the vacant land adjustment is just a terminology saying that you don't have a lot of vacant land.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What about, did this state take into consideration, or that, when they did all this, about all the infrastructure or lack of infrastructure to the municipality and how that impacts them? Because that's a major,
Right, no, it's your responsibility. So a lot of towns, like when we're having an issue, I wouldn't say we, I would say that some of the towns that are south of here who don't have public water and sewer, it's a great way to stop affordable housing from coming to your town. That's not an excuse not to build your affordable housing. It's the municipality's constitutional obligation to provide for affordable housing, so they're gonna have to figure out how to do it.
Building higher, is that an option
Well, then
at
you
the
get-
Acme property?
Well, but then you get into, what does that do to your obligation? It doesn't help you, really. It just means that you have more density, you have more height, you have more traffic, and you're really not fully addressing your obligation totally anyway. So you're kind of like out there just putting more density out there, whether it's across from the turnpike or not. It's still in your
No, yeah,
community,
I
you know?
believe
And
you
once
guys.
you, and it's very interesting, of course, that's kind of isolated, but when you go into court and the court looks at it, they look and see what you currently permit in your zoning. So if you have a zone that permits, obviously you have to look at it in context and what's around it, but still they do take into account, if you have an area in your community where you zone for mid-rise, okay?
Yeah.
At 100 units to the acre.
Okay.
They'll take that into account when they are looking at suitability and other sites. So you don't necessarily want
The-
to bust up your zoning as such, okay? I guess that's what.
And can I ask just another question as far as, because I know you're doing a lot of these different phases, how does Milltown stack up against other municipalities in regards to where we're sitting with meeting the obligations that the state has? I'd imagine no municipality, maybe East Brunswick with the new construction that's going on, but I imagine most municipalities are not meeting
No,
their
so that's,
affordable housing obligations?
that's not actually not true. So there's
Okay.
500 and some municipalities, over 300 have gotten their, what's called their judgment of compliance.
Okay.
They have presented a plan to the courts have reviewed it and blessed it and said, you guys are meeting your obligation right now. They have the zoning in place and people are building the units.
I know, I was on the Board of Ed, I know they have a strategic planning committee, and they have, you know, as Donna said, Ford Avenue has been looming for almost 20 years now, so it's not like these schools have not been aware that there is a potential for development in Milltown. So Dr. Brown and Mr. Schneider were kind enough to join us to just give a little bit of a highlight of how the school district will accommodate students that move into their district, or how they prepare for that. So if you could just give a few, to give everyone just a little heads up on what you're going to do when and if these things come to fruition.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us to join the conversation tonight, because it is an important topic, and I know in Milltown our children are definitely the center of most activities, and certainly the ones that we want to see represent us as best they can. So I do want to reassure everybody that right now I don't feel that our schools are overcrowded. I know somebody made that comment earlier. I do have some statistics that I can share with you tonight, but we're always going to be open to welcoming any new families that move in, whether it's new developments, whether it's new people that just move around the corner in a resale. We're always going to have room for everybody, and I don't think that we need to start projecting like the worst case scenario yet. I was having conversations about this all week long in anticipation for this meeting, and I think that we've always, like the mayor said, known that we have Ford Avenue coming. Now Acme just seems to be a little bit more of a sooner potential, but the way that these developments work, from what you can hear, is there's only so many units that are 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. The potential for them filling up with families of 2, 3, 4 is just the way you roll the dice, right? So you could get a complete influx, or you can have very minimal. So I think right now, what we need to do is we need to plan, like the mayor said, like we always have. We need to look at the several possibilities that we've always had on the table for what we want to do, whether it's building on to the schools, whether it's looking for property that we rent. We could relocate different classes, different departments to make room in the existing buildings. There's potential for even moving some office space out of Milltown. That was something we considered too. So there's a lot of different scenarios, but I think before we start really projecting what would be the solution is I think we need to just look at the demographic study that we're going to have done, which talking to the demographer, it's too soon for the schools to contract for that. He wants to get closer to the groundbreaking. He's already looked at the timeline for the project, and that's not something that he feels would be a worthwhile investment right now, because it's too far out. So we do have a relationship with the demographer. He is familiar with this area. He's done studies before in Middlesex County as well as around the state. So I trust his judgment, and I would go with his recommendation as far as when he would plan to do that, to give us a heads up as far as what he feels would be an influx. But like I was saying, we have several different options that we can look at. One of the other things that I know Mr. Zambrana mentioned to me was the potential for busing. So I've heard those conversations going around too. So Milltown's very proud to be a walking district. You know, Mr. Veet has a very strong connection with Keep Middlesex Moving, so we run our bike campaigns every year. Our police officers show up to teach the children bike safety and how to walk to school safely. And that would change if we have redevelopment at Acme, because the distance from the schools to that site is over what the limit would be for walking. So we would have to put a bus route in. A bus route wouldn't mean just one bus stop, so we could consider what that would be. Milltown would not take that on. We're not in the business of transportation. that would be too much for us to own that bus and deal with the personnel. Bus drivers right now are a hot commodity. If anybody's looking for a part-time job, that is the job to get, because you can name your price. But we go through the county commission, which is over on Stelton Road, Piscataway. They have a co-op, it's called. And the co-op bids out for all of our transportation, and that's who we contract through as a third party to manage our transportation routes. Mainly to Spotswood, but also we have children that are bused out of district to other schools for a variety of reasons. So that's where we would get a bus route through the commission, just like we do for our other buses. And there would be recommendations from the people that we deal with who are in the business of transportation to, recommend where the stops would be. If we're going to add more throughout the town, that would be a discussion for another day. I can't speak to that now. I'm sure that people would be kind of interested to see if that might be an option. Some working parents, everything else you could lay on the table, that might be something people would want aside from those living in that development. So that's, again, a discussion for another day. But a bus route would definitely be part of what the schools would have to take on if that was developed. As far as the committee that would be looking at this, we do have a strategic planning committee. We also have a facilities committee, and the facilities committee would really be the one working with the architect, working with the demographer, working with our business administrator, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, to really study what the options would be, both in-house, like I mentioned, dealing with the existing structures that we have, and then looking at possibilities for renting space or reorganizing. The other huge option that other towns do is you pass a referendum and you really go all in and you add on. So that's why I brought these numbers. So what we found data from New Jersey, we found data nationally, and then I have our grade level populations and our average class sizes for the classes that just got promoted yesterday. So when you look at pre-K, K1 and 2 and 3, which is Parkview, right? Our average class size in that area is about 21 students. The New Jersey average is 17 and the national average is 19. So in the lower grades, could we possibly say that if we added a fifth section that we could bring our numbers down? Probably. Is it necessary to do that? I don't know. Our children all do very well because we have a great deal of support from parents in this town. So you have to consider a lot of different things. You also have to consider the teacher-student ratio. Our teacher-student ratio is one teacher for every 11 students. Nationally, it's one teacher for every 15. So you take into account the kind of town we have, with all the support we get from our families. Our children, thank goodness, do not come to us in a way that children who are in other types of districts do. We don't even have a free breakfast program here. So we have students that are coming, willing to learn. We have teachers that are the highest quality, I like to say, in the state, because I think our faculty is excellent and always willing to grow and learn. So in addition to that, with the reduced student-teacher ratio, we have lots of intervention programs. So again, are you going to benefit from a lower class size by putting on in addition, by moving children out and reorganizing and readjusting so that you come up with space for another K, another 1, another 2, another 3? Maybe, but not everything's about class size. When I was doing student teaching, I had 33 kids in a 3rd grade. We're nowhere near that number, nowhere near that number. And our kids do really well. My 3rd graders as a student teacher did really well, and there were 33 of them. They all came out learning 3rd grade material and went to 4th grade, and they were perfectly fine. So like I said, I think that we need to just kind of see how it goes in a sense. I'm not saying that we don't need to plan and have some serious studies done and look at what the potential is, but I'm not sure we need to go all in prior to really seeing what true impact is going to be. And then as you get out of Parkview and you go into the intermediate grades at JK and up into the middle school, it does get closer to the New Jersey average. And in middle school especially, we're right at the average. So, and that's because in middle school you can spread them out more, the way the schedule works. So I do believe that it's a good thing to have a growing population. There's a lot of small districts, especially in Monmouth County, that have a declining student population. And what happens when that occurs is they look at you for consolidation. And I know in a lot of years past, when I've been working with our different members of our boards of education, everybody values having a board of education in Milltown and likes to have the kind of input that we can in our small school district. And if you didn't have a population that either held steady or grew, you would eventually have the potential of being targeted for that like Helmetta was.
I think some of the, the misconception is, especially with Acme, is that, I don't know what it's 3-4 years out or something, that's going to be built and the schools are going to then scramble last minute to try and figure out, how to accommodate whatever come in. But as Dr. Brown said, as we discussed as a board, we have plenty of plans in place. I mean, we explore different opportunities. As you saw, at JK, we put in that new module. That didn't happen just overnight. A lot of plans came in, into place. The other thing is, I think some of the misconception is the budget that we receive. So each year we hold a public, budget meeting. Very few people show up. I think this year the rumor was that, we got what, $30 million or something.
I heard that.
Okay, yeah, right. Yeah, it was a rumor. So, we are controlled by a budget that, from state funding, from other funding, but most of it comes from, the state that we get. So, that's the other thing too, is if, and again, it's an if, there is a reason for, building out or anything, I mean, we do then have to rely on some of the public to help us out. We would expect that, as Dr. Brown obviously said. I mean, we do have probably, I know we're all biased here, but, one of the best school systems, I think. I mean, you see that every day. I have a daughter, a stepson that went through all of us, and we couldn't be happier with the education. But we do want, obviously Milltown is changing. We have to embrace that with new, with new housing coming in. But, it's a partnership. So we're going to ask, the public to, that's why we have forums like this, to come in, to give us input and to work through that. But again, I just want to reassure everybody that, Acme is going to happen, but the schools are going to be well prepared for it. So when it's built, people start moving in, and when the new school year starts, things are going to be, well in place to accommodate however many students might come in.
I think the kindergarten in particular seems to have a lot of students, probably grade 1 to 24, I think, something along those lines, is what at least I see, from my specific daughter and her specific needs. But yeah, I guess as far as when the Acme redevelopment does occur, that's 2 to 3 years.
More or less. We don't know exactly.
And then the demographic study would occur. When would that? I guess what I want to make sure, the development or expansion of a school takes a long period of time. So I'd want to make sure that there's not a lag from when we perceive a potential issue on the horizon, where we're saying, oh look, now we have trailers all over the place. And now if we can address it beforehand. And I agree. I think it's great having a more diverse, because I think it's a diversified student body. I'm all for that. But from my perspective as a parent, I do see, the classroom, at least in kindergarten, it's packed. There's not room for another kindergarten class. I don't think. I'm not in school every day.
Well, the kindergarten class that we just promoted to first grade had 88 kids. And the first grade class had 87, and the second grade class had 86, and the third grade class had 85. So they're all about the same size, and there's 4 sections. Kindergarten is structured a little bit differently because of a couple different reasons that I'm not going to get into.
Yeah, no.
But that might be why she had a little bit larger of a class, but the overall grade level population is about the same. It's pretty consistent. It's
I think 1 to 24, that's like the state, or isn't it 1 to 24 is the state maximum student teacher ratio? 1 to 24.
1 to 24,
Yeah.
if you're in a Title I school. We're not Title
For what you're saying, for like the old Abbott district?
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly, they limit.
yeah. Oh, I thought it's 1 to 21.
We don't have, but we
Okay.
have 22 kids on average in the kindergarten class. Like I said, if you want to speak about your daughter's class.
No, I think it's great. I think she's doing
Everybody-
great. I guess what I really want to, just that if we see this development occurring maybe in, they say 3 years, but, you know, it could be 2 years, right? You know, it could be
So
quicker.
go be a year, at least, you know,
Well,
go, again, the demographer looked at the timeline for the construction, which is all I can offer him at the moment.
Yeah.
And he recommended that it was too soon to put it in the budget for this year. So the plan is to do it in next year's budget, which opens up July 1st. So if he feels like he wants to do it over next summer, next summer, then that's the recommendation we'll go with. But as Mr. Schneider said, it's something that we already have a sense of what our options are. I already have floor plans drawn up and a preliminary cost. So we're already kind of there. I've been looking at different spaces and trying to be creative and working within the footprint of what we have for years. And I do agree with you that we're pretty much spent.
Yeah.
There's not too many other places. I even went as far as bringing him into one of the 2 locker rooms at Parkview, because we only need one for a visiting team. And I asked if we could renovate one of the locker rooms into a small group construction space for OTPT or something like that, and I was told no.
Yeah.
So I'm trying my best to work with what I have, but I'm also limited by code and everything else too. So if we are going to expand at this point, it's going to have to be either an addition or looking at space in town to rent. And like I said, it can even be as far as administrative offices. We can move them out of town. Can't move kids out of town. We can move the offices out of town. But that's logistically, that makes things difficult too. But anyway,
No,
the point
it's
is
a
that we
difficult,
have,
not an
we
easy
have
solution.
had
Yeah.
these serious conversations. We definitely have preliminary plans in place. We've explored other options just this past year because, as you know, the board offices vacated the 3 classrooms in the back wing of JK, and we moved into the modular at the rear of the school. That was a long time deciding how to do that, what the best strategy would be, and that's ultimately what we decided. We did not need to go to the town for a referendum on that, which was almost a $1.5 million project, because we saved for it over the past 7 years. When you're talking about the plans that I have right now drafted up for another expansion that would accommodate classroom space, that is not something you can save for. We would have to have the support of the community enough to pass a referendum. Now, the last huge construction project we had in Milltown that asked for a referendum was basically the JK Library, where we added that whole section on and we closed in the existing library in the middle of JK and created classroom space at that. And that debt was just paid off with this current FY24 budget starting July 1st. So that debt went away. So the potential to have another referendum would, yes, have a tax impact, but if you look at it as a swap almost from what you were paying over the last 10 years, you would have a little reprieve, and then you'd go into it. But again, that is a town-based decision because it goes up for a vote. So we would have to be very careful in making sure that that's really the solution that we need. That's why I'm saying we need to really look at all the options before we go out asking for something like that, because that's a huge commitment for everybody who lives there.
It's not going to be the first thing we do, or it's,
Right.
you know, the only option we're ever going to consider. So people know if they came to that, at least, you know, we would have had all these options laid out. What's the best one that's going to accommodate?
Yes, sir.
This might be an odd question, but we're talking about the Acme, and that's a pretty, like, kind of a small development compared to what Berger would do. So my question would be, let's just say Berger tomorrow says, hey, I want to do this. That would be a giant impact. And is it even feasible to have enough space to put school development into the current, plan that we have in this town? To add, if you have 350 units, isn't that the number I heard? 350
No, it's like
We
down
have
300, but.
300.
We have a
That's
lot of space on our
lot of
own
kids.
property though.
Right.
So we would have space to add on. It
Should
just-
that go to
Absolutely, we have
bond?
space at Parkview and JK. The immediate need, in my opinion, would be parking. JK has a better ability to absorb it. But again, it's something that we need to really look at.
Insight on the traffic study of, with the Arisa property, what, any of the findings?
No, I don't, but they do have to do a traffic study.
Yeah, so I recall, and Dave, you were there too, that, one of the things that came of the traffic study was that people coming in, while it seems like, oh, it's just gonna be exploding with traffic, going from a commercial to a residential, would actually generate less traffic, right? So it's not people coming in and out all day, it's, people leaving to go to work or working from home. And so I don't remember what the number is, but that would be part of the planning board application, and you can go and find that information on what was in the traffic study for that. The other question that I got is, the 6 people on the council, that was before I was mayor, it was unanimously voted to do these overlay zones, not
Right.
anticipating that in a year and a half,
Right.
Arisa would say, hey, we're gonna.
Well, yeah, so one of the things that you're doing when you're doing the overlays, you're trying to pick sites where it's going to, the key words are realistic opportunity. So you gotta pick sites where you think that, yeah, this could be something that actually happens, and probably maybe you're not happy that the Acme did happen, but it goes to show to the judge when we go for our compliance hearing that we did the best we could. We're a tiny town, and we really looked at all the different properties, and we selected some overlays, and look, we were right. Acme went out, and that's already been something approved. I mean, Ford Avenue's been going on all these years, and Acme came in right away, the owner, I should say, when Acme said they were gonna leave and said, I need to do something with my property, I'm not gonna be getting any money, I'm just gonna have an empty store sitting there. I wanna take advantage of this and build some affordable housing, so when we go for our compliance hearing, it's gonna really help us, because the judge is gonna say, you guys did a really good job to do the best that you could do with what you have. And it's showing that this is a realistic opportunity. It's not just a fly-by-night idea, it happened.
And the one other thing, when they came before the planning board to do the site plan, I think the perception probably was that the planning board could say no, and that was gonna end the entire project, right? So the feedback we got was people were coming there to voice their concerns about the schools, and to voice their concerns about development, but that was just for the site plan, because they were conforming to their zone,
Right, so the
correct?
state law says very specifically that if you come with an application that meets all of the borough's ordinance requirements, they shall grant an approval. It's a mandatory. You can't reject something that somebody complies fully with your ordinance. The whole purpose of having the ordinance is so that you hope that somebody submits an application that complies with the ordinance. So you certainly can't have somebody spend all that time and money and then have them go to a board and get denied. So that would be something that the courts would deem arbitrary, capricious, unreasonable, and it would just be overturned in court.
Right, and Donna, like you said, they came in front of the planning board, and the planning board came to them with a lot of questions to make it accommodating to the town, and they were very accommodating to every single one of our suggestions, so.
Yeah, they took public feedback into account. Go.
One more for you. So, presumably in a town like Milltown, or any town, there's a theoretical limit to the number of units, like theoretical, right? And we run out of space. So at some point, capped by zoning. At some point, zoning, and you mentioned, the reason for the question, you mentioned you're always going to have an ongoing obligation. So at some point, that's in conflict. Which governs? Do our zoning laws, then you say, you got to rewrite your zoning laws because your obligation is continuing to accumulate. You can no longer sustain under current zoning laws.
No, you'll get the vacant land adjustment because you don't have the land. But there are towns that have met their obligations. The big cities, Newark, Camden. They don't have an affordable housing obligation because they have so much affordable housing. Many of their residents live in housing that would satisfy affordable.
Right, but-
So they have a zero obligation.
But theoretically,
Right.
they could max out. Under their current zoning laws, they say we cannot build any more.
Yeah, but they don't have an
apartments
obligation, they're done.
forever.
right now, yeah, they got so many units.
No, until 2025.
No, they're zero. They're zero. They're urban municipalities have zero. Zero obligations, because they have so many.
But we in perpetuity,
Yeah, your vacant land adjustment never goes away. So if there's other opportunities, if Home Depot goes out, they'll build, they could. But again, you only have to put the zoning in place. Town doesn't own the land. If Home Depot flips it and they're now, they want to do something else that's permitted in the zone, or they want to go for a use variance from the zoning board, they have every right to do it. They don't have to build the affordable housing just because affordable housing is one of the uses. Almost every ordinance has many uses. You could do these 20 different things on your property as long as you conform and you have the right lot size and bulk standards, etc. Get an application together to go to the planning board. The town doesn't say, well, no, Bob, you're going to do a fast food restaurant, and Pete, you're going to do the gas station. No, they all have the opportunity to do whatever they want, and they can, as long as it conforms with the ordinance. So,
could they build an apartment building, assuming it met zoning, and have none of it be affordable?
no.
Okay, so they can't do anything at all.
Nobody can build multifamily housing in Middletown without having an affordable housing obligation. Especially because you're a vacant land town. Now, there's other towns, if they've already met their obligation, you can build multifamily housing with zero affordable units.
So zoning always does.
Obligation?
Are you obligated to give them the variances, or you don't uphold your own zoning law?
Well, it depends. I mean, well, it actually depends. I mean, if
In
you're,
the mandatory set aside, no.
right.
No, but if a zoning board does give an approval on a multifamily with over 6 units per acre, then it must have, but it doesn't require you to approve it. If you deny it, it's okay. That's what that says. Okay? It doesn't require you
Doesn't
to
require
approve
to
it.
give the variance.
But if you approve it, you have to have it in.
And a lot of that is, like you know, the Joyce Kilmer area. I know a lot of those houses are, they're supposed to be single family, but they're actually split up and there's multiple families living in them and they've been grandfathered in and all this stuff. But what if there was something done about that, or also like, I hate to say it, but like a town-wide rent control or a specified area for rent controls? Would that help with our numbers at all, affordable housing numbers at all? Or?
Yeah, so the numbers that we're talking about are new construction numbers. There's a whole separate rehab number.
Okay.
Right, so the numbers that we're talking about that are going to be addressed by the Ford Avenue and the Acme site are your new construction.
Thank you for your great questions. As always, we want to keep you informed, and if after this meeting you have any other questions, the council members and I, all of our emails and contact information is right on the borough website. The couple of pieces of information that we promise we will get up on the borough website, and feel free to come to any council meetings or set up time to speak with any of us. But I really, the council and the planning and zoning board only do so much. We rely on all of the informed, and if after this meeting you have any other questions, the council members and I, all of our emails and contact information is right on the borough website. The couple of pieces of information that we promise we will get up on the borough website, and feel free to come to any council meetings or set up time to speak with any of us. But I really, the council and the planning and zoning board only do so much. We rely on all of the professionals, and I especially want to thank Dr. Brown and Mr. Schneider for coming this evening to explain about the impact to the school. So thank you all very much for coming, and enjoy your summer, and we'll look forward to seeing you all. And thanks to you at home. Hopefully you'll take the time to watch this and get some of your questions answered. But thanks for joining us.